Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. It's a great joy for me to be here in this opening webinar for our Blue Hope campaign. My name is Charles Hay and I'm the British High Commissioner in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. And what we are doing now for the next hour and 20 minutes or so is we're having a webinar to launch our Blue Hope campaign, which is a campaign we're running for the next 4 days or so, where we will be focusing on the ocean and what is happening in the ocean and all the things that we should be doing to prevent those things happening in the ocean. It's a real privilege for me to be able to introduce this campaign. We hadn't originally intended to do a campaign like this. We'd originally intended to have physical launch events. We'd intended to do things in a rather traditional, old-fashioned way. But with the advent of COVID, of course, none of that is open to us. So we have taken advantage of that to do things in a different way, and by doing so, hopefully to reach an even bigger audience than we might have done in more traditional ways. And we've got some fantastic partners that have worked with us on the Blue Hope campaign. We have, I'll just introduce them very briefly, Asia Dive Expo, who are kindly hosting this on their Facebook page, which you're probably looking at right now. Plastic Oceans UK, and we'll come on to Joe Ruxton, the founder of that, in a minute. We have Mura Technology, who are championing a form of technology that might lead us to be able to recycle plastics that at the moment we cannot do. Timor Blue, WRAP, which is a partnership to address plastic pollution, ZooBlue, and YTL. And we have, during the course of the week, we have a series of webinars. This is the launch one, but there are many others, which will be telling stories about the ocean. We'll be introducing photographers and all sorts of people who have different interests in what is happening in the ocean. Some really exciting things coming up. Most excitingly, one of our partners is the Malaysia Department of Education, and they are working with us to get our plastic worksheet, which Joe Ruxton will talk about in a minute, out to 10,000 schools here in Malaysia. So that will reach many hundreds of thousands of school children who, during this time of COVID, they're stuck in the house, not able to get out and about. My kids are amongst them. We were looking at the worksheets earlier today. They're absolutely fantastic. And they're going to make people think about plastic, I hope, in an entirely new way. And not just think about it in a new way, but also take positive decisions to do something about it. And my kids, for example, were saying this morning that we must do more about plastic packaging in our household. So I'm sure it will provoke a lot of conversations and a lot of decisions to take action. I certainly hope so. We have a website running for the period, bluehope.org. I'm sure that those of you watching have already been onto the website, but you'll find a lot of resources there. So what we have today is an absolutely wonderful panel of people who are joining us literally from all around the world, from the UK and from the US, and of course here in Malaysia. And let me just introduce them briefly. They all are extremely well known, globally well known. Firstly, Dr. Sylvia Earle, who is a legend in the ocean world. It is humbling to think that a number of years ago now, she walked on the floor of the ocean in a place more deep than anyone before or since has ever walked, unattached to anything except a simple communications line. That's a truly humbling thing. During her long career, she has led more than 80 expeditions. She has logged more than 7,000 hours underwater. She has led cutting-edge research, and at the moment, she holds the position of Explorer in Residence at the National Geographic Society. We also have Joe Ruxton. Joe, I've already mentioned, as the founder of Plastic Oceans UK, which is a charity she registered 11 years ago. She has been a campaigner for the oceans for many, many years. She was a lead member of the BBC's diving team during the Blue Planet, the production of the first Blue Planet back in 1997. And she then broke away to form her own company to make more programs and films about conservation and about the oceans. And then we have Paul Rose. Paul is he's one of the world's most experienced science expedition leaders, and at the moment he's expedition leader for the National Geographic Pristine Seas expedition. He's a broadcaster, an author and a journalist, and a presenter of BBC television programs. I think most interestingly and excitingly for me, he was base commander of the British Antarctic Survey, and I think spent 10 years in the Antarctic, which is absolutely remarkable. It's one place on Earth that I absolutely want to go to, but have never yet managed it. And he has the honor of having a mountain in Antarctica named after him, which not many people can boast. So that is our panel. Thanks very much, all of you, for coming. So we're going to turn to the panelists in a minute for them each to talk briefly about their interest and their concerns and their comments. And we'll have a question and answer session. There is a facility whereby you can post questions on Facebook. Please do use that, because we'll be looking at that and we'll be putting your questions to the panelists. But before we turn to the panelists, we have a very special guest appearance from Sir David Attenborough. Now, Sir David Attenborough is probably the most globally renowned person in this field as a television personality and as somebody who has been writing about, broadcasting about, and defending the natural world since 1954. We are incredibly fortunate that David Attenborough is a supporter of our campaign. I had the great honor to discuss it with him just the other day. He can't be with us today because, as you can imagine, this is World Oceans Day, of course. He is probably the most in-demand person on the planet on World Oceans Day. So it's just simply physically impossible for him to be with us. But we are very fortunate to have a recorded message for him. So please, let's see the video now.
Hello, my name is David Attenborough, and I'm a naturalist and a natural history filmmaker. Over the last 65 years, I've been very privileged to travel the world and see every environment from the ocean to the jungle. We're now facing a range of extremely challenging environmental problems. But one of the most pressing issues of our times is plastic pollution. While plastic now affects the entire planet, it's our oceans that bear the full brunt of plastic pollution. What's so tragic about plastic pollution is that it is so totally unnecessary. The plastic in our oceans should never have found its way there in the first place. And yet, a staggering 8 million tons of plastic now ends up in our oceans every year, causing untold harm to marine wildlife. Blue Planet 2's crew saw plastic everywhere they filmed, but this catastrophic damage to our oceans is reversible, and nature can recover if we give it a chance. While the actions of just one of us, you, may seem to be so very small with really no effect at all, in fact, knowing there are hundreds of thousands of people all doing the same thing is starting to have a truly positive effect. Every single one of us now needs to think, and I mean really think, about how we use plastic. So, I strongly urge you all to treat plastic with care, because if it reaches the environment, it will stay there for a very long time, if not forever, and ultimately affect us all. Every one of us should be extremely proud of their natural heritage and passionate to protect and conserve it and ensure that it remains around for future generations. We all have a responsibility to care for our planet. The future of humanity, and indeed all life on Earth, now depends on us. Thank you very much, and good luck. Hello.
Okay, Sylvia, over to you.
So I echo Sir David's remarks about the big problem that we have with plastic. In fact, the two big problems that I think are facing the ocean are what we're putting into the ocean and what we're taking out of the ocean. But with plastics, it's a double problem, because not only all that junk is in the water, but much of what goes into the sea tangles the creatures that are there. A large percentage of the plastic debris, the waste, comes from fishing. And they're ghost nets, they're long lines, they're old discarded fish traps. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of marine mammals, birds, turtles, as well as the fish that are unintentionally caught as a consequence of all the stuff we put into the ocean. So it's really important to understand what the problems are. The biggest problem of all is that people don't know. And with the lack of knowing comes complacency. If you don't know, you can't care. And I think what we're doing right now with trying to communicate what's happening and not just hear the problems, but why it matters, and also what we can do about it. So part of what I've been doing for most of my life, that spans several decades now of splashing around in the ocean, is identifying critical areas, working with people around the world under the umbrella of an organization called Mission Blue, working with the National Geographic, working with more than 200 other organizations to try to create this network of hope. I love the concept of Blue Hope and this initiative that is underway, because if you can't get people to really understand why they should care, how the ocean affects them with every breath they take and every drop of water they drink, why would they bother to take action? There has been an attitude that what you throw into the ocean just goes away. I mean, I've grown up with that attitude. The concept that there is a phrase called deep six. You throw something in the ocean, you deep six it, it goes away. Only now we are seeing that it's coming back to haunt us. And it isn't just the plastic that you can see. I think even more worrisome are the tiny little pieces that plastic breaks up and becomes not just microplastics, but now even nanoplastics. So we have a problem, the big problem that is of our making. Sir David Attenborough is absolutely right. It's up to us. We're the problem, but we're also the solution. And I think in the next little piece of time, we'll have a chance to discuss some of these issues. And I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists. And I think we should dive in.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sylvia. As you note, you have been working in and around oceans, the seas for many, many years.
Not enough.
When you
More to come.
when you look back over all those hundreds, thousands of hours that you've spent, have you seen big changes yourself in the way that the ocean is?
Now, I think if I have a special value at this point in time, it's as a witness, because I've been around long enough to have dived into oceans where you expect to see sharks everywhere, all the time. You expect to see big fish and lots of little fish, clear water in most places. I went to school in Florida, a place called Clearwater. You can't call it Clearwater anymore. So as a witness to the changes of seeing 90% of the sharks taken out of the ocean. I've seen the loss of tunas and swordfish. Half the coral reefs are either gone or are in a state of decline. In some places, the loss is even greater. We've witnessed just in recent times what's happened to the Great Barrier Reef. It's one of the first protected areas established by conscious action. Now, when I was a child, most of the ocean was protected by its inaccessibility. Today, most of the ocean is open for exploitation, even the deep sea. So I see reasons for despair everywhere I turn, but I also see plenty of reason for hope. And one of the reasons for hope is when we stop killing things and when we stop dumping things into the ocean. It's remarkable. Ocean, nature is resilient, not infinitely so. We can kill the last of anything and then hope is gone. In the Gulf of Mexico, when I was in school, I did not even know that monk seals existed there. But again, by the time I graduated from high school, they were gone. So I was a contemporary of these beautiful little animals that now are just gone. But we have lost thousands of species on my watch in my lifetime, but most of them have not been named. They're animals that are lost when a coral reef is blown up or when trawling of the ocean takes place. Species that disappear and we have yet even to know that they're there. So, but because people, and I'm with some right now, I mean, what Paul Rose is doing with Pristine Seas, what I'm trying to do with Hope Spots, what I think, Joe, you're trying to take the pressure off. We just need to protect the ocean. Stop doing the things that harm the ocean. The health of the ocean and our health are absolutely like this. If we have a system that's in trouble, then we're in trouble.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I think what you say about awareness is incredibly important because, as you say, even when I was young, nobody ever thought that the stuff we threw in the sea would ever come back to haunt us, as it were, because the ocean is so vast. How can we humans possibly damage it? I mean, there's a parallel there, isn't there, with climate change? I mean, the emissions we put in the air. Even in those days, nobody ever thought that the carbon we were pumping out was going to cause structural damage. And of course, there's a complex interaction, isn't there, between that climate change and the ocean, because the ocean becomes more acidified through higher carbon dioxide levels in there, and then that leads to coral bleaching and all the other damage that we see in the ocean.
Well, it's great that you know those things. You're in a position of authority to do something about it. We need everyone to know those issues and why it matters back to us. I think one positive thing about the current pandemic is a recognition that we're all in this together. We're all united by a common concern. We're vulnerable. We can try to build walls and stop things at the border, but viruses don't care. They don't care about walls or borders. They're everywhere. And climate is also everywhere. It's another unifying matter that we're all in this together. And what we do anywhere affects everywhere. And knowing that, it means that everybody can do something that will make a difference in a positive way, just as it works the other way. Whatever we do that's negative affects everybody too.
Yes, I guess what we're struggling towards is a more harmonious way of living with the planet. And yes, maybe you're right. Maybe the COVID virus is a kind of a cautionary tale to all of us that we can't we're not the masters here. You know, the environment, the natural world can turn around and bite us in ways that, you know, we can't actually deal with very easily. And all of our much vaunted technology doesn't give us a way out. Joe, can I turn to you? One thing that I found most, I don't know, most difficult to accept, I suppose, about watching your films is about the microplastics. And, you know, we were all familiar with the, you know, the ghost fishing staff and all the rest of it, but actually that may not be the biggest problem.
No, it's something that I've been learning about certainly over the past decade. Before I do, I just wanted to say that you have no idea what it feels like to be following Sir David Attenborough and Dr. Sylvia Earle, who have influenced my life and my career so much. And now I'm the one that's got to speak after them. So this is a little daunting, but obviously very much of an honor. When I started working on the film, originally, I thought that the whole thing was going to be about this phenomenon called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which was supposed to be a new continent forming in the Pacific. It was thousands of miles wide. It was 10 meters deep. And I wanted to go and see it for myself because I thought, what a thing to do a film about. And of course, if it was floating on the surface, maybe we could send fleets out to get rid of it. And I spent a month out there in the center of the North Pacific. And we kept looking for it. And I had all these plans of how we were going to film it, but we couldn't see it. But what we were doing was trawling the surface with plankton nets. And we started 400 miles west of San Francisco. And when the net came up in what to me looked like beautiful blue water, it had these little tiny pieces of plastic in it. And I was horrified. But then the closer we got to the center, the more we found in the net until we got to the absolute center of this so-called Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So the center of where the currents swirl around and everything collects. Every net was absolutely choked with microplastics. And it wasn't just that, but the zooplankton, the little animals there, you could see they were feeding on it because many have little transparent bodies and you could see the plastic inside. And of course, those are the very heart of the food chain. So that to me was such an eye-opener. And the whole premise for the film then changed because I realized there's no way we were going to do something about something you couldn't see. And I even considered making a radio program about it because I didn't know how to make these images, you know, hold an audience attention, and started thinking of other ways to do that by bringing in charismatic marine life and showing the effects on that. So that was, to me, was an eye-opener. And the microplastics, goodness me, it certainly is an issue. And as Sylvia said, the more we learn about nanoplastics now and how we're breathing them in, we have to get a handle on this ridiculous addiction that we've got to single-use plastic.
When I was a child, Joe, there were no plastics. I mean, really. There are some highly valued little bits and pieces here and there, but no one ever threw anything away. They were just too important. Now it's this use it once, throw it away, as if there is an away.
Exactly.
So, and then there was this great campaign about, well, it's okay, they'll just break up and go away, thinking that small pieces meant they weren't a problem anymore. But as you point out, they just become an increasing problem. I mean, you can haul out an old fishing net and dispose of it in a way that it won't do harm. But once it's broken up into these tiny little fragments, how do you get them out? You pull a plankton net, you get a lot of plankton along with the plastic. So you kill a lot of things in the process of trying to remove those tiny little shreds. So don't let it get there in the first place.
Exactly, exactly. And that's a strange thing anyway, the fact that we are making items to be thrown away out of a product that was designed not to break down. You know, plastic doesn't decompose. So what on earth were we thinking, and how come we've been doing this for so long? And I'm just as bad. I certainly 10 years ago, I would have bought water in a plastic bottle, 11 years ago, I should say, because I just didn't think. But, you know, now what I've witnessed, it's madness that we're still doing this.
I agree.
Absolutely. And so, Joe, do you think that recycling is the answer to this question?
Not with plastic, I don't. Recycling, as far as plastic is concerned, is just downcycling. There's only so many times it can go through the system, even with the best system. So each time the plastic goes through, it loses properties and will end up as just hard black plastic that nobody wants. So it's almost like a misnomer to say recycling. You can recycle glass, you can recycle aluminium, but plastic is constantly downcycling, and the amount we're recycling is very low, and it's doing nothing to combat the exponential way that we're producing it. So I don't think it's the answer. Not that way.
So we need to find a new material. I mean, we can't. I mean, Sylvia, you said that when you were young there were no plastics, but you know, it's quite hard to imagine now going back to those days. I mean, probably impossible, isn't it? I mean, so what do we need to find? We need to find something that can have the properties of plastic, but then
we need to change our throwaway lifestyle. You know, we need to value what we have, and the whole reusing, replacing, redesigning, rethinking, all of that comes first. We did it before, and certainly I remember a time when we weren't using plastic in that way. We've just sort of valued what we've got.
It's a choice. It's not a necessity. Absolutely. It is a choice.
Absolutely.
We're choosing to do something that is not good for us. I mean, and it is an addiction, but it is hard in 2020 to live your life in the absence of colliding with plastic. It's kind of everywhere. It's packaging. We can package things differently. I think that appealing to corporations and putting the pressure on, putting the heat on, I mean, to come up with alternatives. For most of civilization, we got along without them. Maybe in the next generation, we can sort of shift gears and use our wonderful capacity to manipulate through chemistry materials that truly are not causing harm. It should be the goal, should be mandated, because it's not good for us. It's killing us. Certainly not good for our health. And it isn't good for all those creatures in the ocean, those innocent animals that get entangled, as well as the chemistry that is affected when the plastics break down and are engulfed by a whole host of things. Oh, and then there's the other piece of the chain. When you munch on an oyster and eat the whole animal, I wonder what the oyster's been eating. Or when you eat these little fish like a herring, wonder what the herring has been gobbling up. It comes with the plankton that delicious crunch.
And certainly with the bivalves and oysters and mussels, you are eating the whole thing.
And because the chemistry is affected as well.
Exactly.
So even though you just have a nice little fish fillet, it's there.
The chemicals go into the mussels and the bits that we eat.
I'm pleased you brought that up, Sylvia, because it's one of the surprising things with me about the nanoparticles and the fact that plastic is in the food chain and it's in us. When we discovered that nanoparticles cross the blood-brain barrier in fish, I think it was 2017 or something, I was ready to pop the champagne corks because I thought, fantastic, that's the motivational force. Things are really going to change. But it sort of got partly lost, and I was so surprised. I thought that, communicating the rubbish we put in the sea, this is it. We've really, by chance, cracked it. This is going to be the common denominator to really change behavior and reset values. And of course, we carried on.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the explanation for what's happening in the world today. We've got plastic in the brain.
It affects the immune system, so that could be why we're so susceptible to viruses.
Well, one of the key things about all of this is, where does the responsibility lie for doing something about this? I mean, there's clearly a individual responsibility. There's responsibility on the part of the business, who are, in a way responding to what the public want. And if the public say, we don't want that packaging, we want to do things differently, then business would respond. But also there's a government response, isn't there? In the sense of, laws on banning single-use plastic and so on. So, and we're going to come back to that in a little while, because we're going to have a video from Lord Goldsmith, who's a UK Environment Minister. But before we have that, Paul, let's come to you and hear your reflections.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. And it feels to me at this time that a few enormous events are coming together that lead me to be very optimistic about the plastic situation. We have to recognize the extraordinary place we're in now, called COVID-19. And I'd love to just use it as a springboard, so dare I say, opportunity for really smart thinking. A bit like my comment with Sylvia there on nanoplastics in the human food chain. I really wouldn't want this opportunity, this time, to pass us by. I mean, we've never seen such a high level of awareness before that our science and our experiences in the front line are so beautiful and indisputably accurate. And who would have thought that we would have seen global press on something like our health, everyone's health, is reliant on everybody else's health on the planet, which in turn is reliant on nature. I mean, that was another great Paul Rose having his champagne moment. We would have dreamed of headlines like that 6 months ago. And so when we come up with these, the 3 steps, protect what we have, restore what's been damaged, and reset our values so it doesn't happen again. I mean, this is now within the culture. It's in the news. It's even some of the worst newspapers are actually pushing this. So, I feel we've really got somewhere at that point. And it means that, when I think of the ocean, I've been diving 51 years. And I still remember as clear as the moment. And my back gets a bit prickly when I talk about it now. That first dive in Easter 1969 at Chesil Cove in the English Channel with my glued together wetsuit, a la Cousteau, black with the yellow tape, and going in, the suit leaked like a sieve and the whole of the ocean came in, and I was unbelievably happy. And I really was. I was alive in the world's largest, most exciting, most powerful, least explored ecosystem. And I just knew that I would continue as a diver. It was the thing that changed my life. It's so defining. And even if I'm diving in an area that has been damaged, I still get that feeling. I love to be underwater. I absolutely love to be underwater. I just wonder why we don't have it as a mandatory requirement for anybody who's a decision maker. Should be at the top of the voting form before you vote for a politician or a chief executive. It should be number 1. Mary, she's a diver. Oh, great. Okay, then I'll move on and see what else she's done. But nice big flashing light, that if it doesn't there, it says, burr, 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 alert, you're about to vote for somebody who isn't a diver. Do you know this? And it's the defining ecosystem, and it's the defining method of connecting with our planet. Sylvia says that the main stresses on the ocean, is what we put in and what we take out, and combined with global warming, which is a hell of a, witch's brew. It's a terrible recipe. With Pristine Seas, I lead Pristine Seas expeditions. We help to find, explore, and help protect the last wild places on Earth. We go to the ones that are beautiful, and along with Sylvia, and we do our best to get them protected. And so far, there's about 6 million square kilometers protected, which sounds like a lot, but it's only about 2 or 3% of the ocean that's fully protected, which is, we celebrate success, and it's another champagne moment, of course. But guess what? We've got a long way to go. And so I carry my enthusiasm for the ocean through, and it's still there. And I encourage everybody to do it. I mean, I'm now living what I call a debris-filled life. Yes, I'm diving amazing places, and yes, I'm diving pristine areas, but my life has been overtaken by debris. I'm the ambassador for the United Nations, Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Conventions, but for their work, we would all be living in a completely out of control global chemistry experiment. That's the part of the UN that manages persistent organic pollutants. And last year, we got to a point where plastics was finally recorded officially and legally as a persistent organic pollutant. You see, before it was just the chemical names and the chemical constituents. So there was lots of terrible chemicals that were registered, but plastics wasn't. But it was last June here in Geneva, which meant that we can now use Interpol and the global customs authorities to prevent and prosecute people who ship plastic around the world, theoretically for recycling, but ends up in an awful condition, mixed plastic, stuff that can't be recycled, and ends up getting dumped. So I think that leads me to your question, chance of your question, Charles, where do we go? Well, enforceable international environmental law. We really do need it. We do need the legal process to it. That's working with illegal fishing. And I think we need to work on it for pollution. So yes, so as a man who's leading a debris-filled life, I mean, I lead the Port of London Authority Clean the Thames campaign. I run all these debris dives, as we call them, spending my life collecting tons of debris. And of course, I'm delighted to be part of Plastic Oceans UK. I got stuck in with that because of Joe's communication skills. I was diving in the world's most pristine places. And then I wasn't on those expeditions. I was swimming around these terrible places, collecting plastic bags and God knows what else, and helping people make artwork of them and communicating this debris. And in one famous moment back in the English Lake District, I couldn't get help. I got help from the council for collecting all this debris, and we had 400 divers, and it was a brilliant, massive debris dive. But then I ended up, by mistake, owning the 11.5 tons of rubbish. I became the legal owner of this stuff, and it took over my life to try and get rid of it. It cost me a fortune in the end. Crazy situation. When it's on the bottom of the water, no one cares about it. You bring it up and clean it up, and I had to personally pay to get rid of the damn stuff. This, when I bumped into Joe and her work, I thought, well, this is the way. You know, no good getting my head down and running at it, although I still do that. Let's get behind some really smart communication. And then on top of that, we've now got Blue Hope, which I'm a really big fan of, you know, particularly the project, getting the kids involved, bringing in, you know, key people, Sylvia Earle, Joe, David Attenborough. We're all here in support of this. So that, combined with this extraordinary confluence of opportunity, leaves me very, very optimistic. I haven't got a bottle of champagne here, but I'm ready for one.
Well, it's really good to hear all of that. And it's interesting you mentioned the Basel Convention, because we've had some experience of that here in Malaysia. We had a situation last year where there were a number of containers full of plastic waste that had been shipped here, not just from the UK, but from Canada and a number of other countries. And you're absolutely right. There is a recycling industry, but the stuff that was being shipped here was not suitable for recycling.
Yes,
and we were able to work with the Malaysian authorities and use the Basel Convention to get these containers, 42 of them so far, shipped back to the UK.
Yes, it was a wonderful moment, Charles. We were here in June in Geneva. Here we had the big meeting, you know, the big council of parties, and there's all of the countries, all of the different nationalities, you know, 1,600 participants, and they're going through the detail of every single element, and it's up on the big screen, and people are in all the languages wondering about the way that particular thing is worded as this international law comes into the place. And when plastic passed it, oh, what a moment that was for us. And very shortly after, it became enforceable through something called the prior informed consent. So if the team in Malaysia had received a document that said, this is all beautifully clean PET, you know, and it's ready to go and it's your process, and then open up the containers and find it's just full of, they can legally turn it back. But until that moment, you know, they could not turn it back, which seems crazy.
Yeah.
But there's something here, you know, if every plastic bottle was returned to sender, if every little scrap of stuff, every discarded fishing net, you send it back to whoever put it there, you know, it's like return to sender.
Yes,
I can see it in my mind, just
Sylvia,
go back to where you came from.
I saw a fantastic thing yesterday, and it was about people in these drive-throughs picking up fast food. And there's still, in a lot of the fast food, there's a ton of plastic and there's all of the styrofoam boxes, you name it. And there's a technology now being proposed that it could automatically, when you pick up your bag with all your food and drinks in it, it could be imprinted with your car registration number. Automatic.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Traceability.
You're talking to a man who you're talking to a man who in the English Lake District a few years ago, a van went past me in the beautiful protected English Lake District. I was cycling and they threw a bunch of fast food stuff out the window, which I stopped, grabbed, caught them up on the road and managed to throw it through the window. And that's what remains one of my high points.
I knew I liked you, Paul.
But I mean, back to your point, Joe, about recycling not being the answer. The thing that I found most difficult, I think, about that whole experience of dealing with this stuff that had been dumped from the UK is that a lot of it probably had been put into recycling in good faith by people. You know, they put it in the recycling bin thinking that somebody was going to take it away and do something with it that would make it useful again. But it turned out that that just wasn't the case.
Illusion.
And
it's an illusion, yeah. So wish cycling, I think people start calling it now.
Exactly.
That you kind of hope that something nice is going to happen to it.
Yes, they think that they're doing the right thing. But I find it incredible that that happened in the first place and that we are sending our waste plastic, or have been, to countries where there is no infrastructure to deal with it. You know, people talk about 5 Asian countries being responsible for half of all the plastic in the ocean. Well, where's that plastic coming from? It's coming from us. And a lot of the time it is people thinking that they're doing the right thing. And this has to be widely acknowledged and people have to understand. But I really hope that the biggest way we tackle it is by stopping using it in the first place. And I would give exceptions, obviously, to the medical side of things, because I know that plastic has saved lives many times over. But the ridiculous packaging that Sylvia's been talking about as well, that's where we need to stop and redesign and rethink and value what we have.
There's a lot of talk about it. The motivation to do something about it has to come not just from the top down, but also from individuals. It is how things happen.
And that's why education is so important. And that's a big part of the work that we do.
Understanding,
yeah.
And on the policy framework, perhaps now is the time that we should hear from Lord Goldsmith about the UK government view. So can we please have the video of Lord Goldsmith?
I want to thank you for inviting me to speak to you on World Oceans Day as we launch the Blue Hope campaign. I hope that you and your families are safe and well. In these very difficult times, it is reassuring to see so much energy being focused on addressing the threats facing our global ocean. From individuals to businesses to governments, we need to keep up the pace. And the evidence is very clear. Marine ecosystems face huge pressures from human activity. 1/3 of marine mammals are threatened with extinction. Nearly 90% of the world's marine fish stocks are now fully exploited, overexploited, or depleted. Half of the world's coastal waters have been degraded. And when it comes to plastic, we face a stomach-churning challenge. We've seen massive coverage on plastic pollution affecting every single part of our ocean, right the way down to the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of our ocean. 100,000 mammals and 1 million birds die every year from eating or getting tangled in ocean plastic. Millions of tons of plastic still enters the marine environment every single year. And if we do nothing, the amount of plastic in our ocean is set to treble by 2025. Now, I don't think there's any question that people around the world want this problem to be solved, but it requires a massive escalation of effort on all of our parts. This Blue Hope campaign will raise awareness on the scourge of ocean plastic pollution and the damage it causes to marine biodiversity, and it will encourage action to tackle it. In the UK, we are getting our own house in order. We're putting the emphasis on making products that last and can be repaired or recycled. We want to design waste right out of the system. We've taken practical steps to eliminate what we don't need, from one of the world's toughest bans on microbeads and restrictions on the supply of plastic straws, buds and stirrers coming into force this October. Our 5p charge for plastic bags has seen 90% fewer bags sold by the main retailers, meaning fewer plastic bags on the beaches and the seafloor. And we've consulted on plans to extend those charges and will publish our response very soon. But we cannot tackle global ocean plastic pollution alone. And we want to help other countries leapfrog the mistakes that the developed nations have made in the past. Since 2018, we've committed up to £70 million to tackling plastic waste, working alongside friends like Rwanda and Samoa in the Commonwealth Clean Ocean Alliance. 34 out of 54 Commonwealth nations are committed to reducing ocean plastic pollution to help meet the Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 14, Life Below Water. And I'm absolutely delighted that in recent weeks, this alliance has grown by 3 new members, the Maldives, Nigeria, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We're funding global research and stopping plastic from entering the ocean in the first place too, encouraging recycling in the textile industry, supporting circular economies worldwide, and developing marine litter action plans through our Commonwealth Litter Programme. And we're supporting 165,000 young people through the UN Environment's Tide Turners Plastic Challenge badge, a West African hit gone global, inspiring a new generation of leaders to tackle plastics with their communities. And it's shocking that 2 billion people currently have no access to waste collection service. So we're working closely with the World Economic Forum to support the Global Plastic Action Partnership, mobilizing investment to avert plastic pollution from source to sea by 2025 by fast-tracking circular economy solutions. National plastic action partnerships have already launched in Ghana and in Indonesia. Sea-based sources of plastic pollution matter too. Ghost fishing gear can account for around 40 to 70% of marine litter by weight. So we're supporting communities around the world to take steps to prevent it being lost, abandoned, or discarded through the Global Ghost Gear Initiative. Working at scale brings results, and we cannot tackle climate change, help nature recover, or help the world's poorest people build sustainable, resilient livelihoods without supporting the health of our ocean. So as custodians of the 5th biggest marine estate in the world, we are leading the charge in protecting the ocean. We have protected an area almost twice the size of England around the UK, and we will do more. Our Blue Belt programme of marine protected areas around the overseas territories is on track to protect an area of ocean the size of India, from the biodiversity jewel of Ascension Island to the subantarctic wilderness of South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands. We are backing mangrove restoration projects, helping vulnerable coastal communities in Madagascar, Indonesia, Latin America, and the Caribbean restore mangrove forests, protecting people from storm surges, storing carbon, and supporting fisheries. And a new £500 million investment in a new Blue Planet Fund will help countries protect marine resources from key anthropogenic threats like climate change, plastic pollution, and overfishing. But we share one global ocean, and we need a whole Earth effort. So I'm delighted that the UK Prime Minister has chosen to put nature at the heart of the UN Climate Change COP26, which the UK, in partnership with Italy, will host in Glasgow next year. We're working very closely with the Chinese, who will be hosting its biodiversity-focused sister CBD conference in Kunming. And I was thrilled that at the UN last year, our Prime Minister launched the Global Ocean Alliance in support of a new CBD target to protect at least 30% of the global ocean by 2030, including an ambitious outcome from the UN BBNJ agreement to establish an effective mechanism for designating marine protected areas in the high seas. The Global Ocean Alliance has continued to grow, and on World Ocean Day, I am so pleased to announce 7 new joiners today, taking the total to 20 countries. We all depend on our ocean, and we have a duty to act now on behalf of every generation who will also rely on a healthy ocean. So let us build on this positive start using Blue Hope to keep the dialogue flowing so we can roll out solutions for the long-term health of the ocean that we all share.
couple of questions from the audience also.
Okay.
Ambitious outcome from the UN EBOJ agreement to establish an effective mechanism for designating marine protected areas in the high seas. The Global Ocean Alliances continue to grow, and on World Ocean Day, I am so pleased to announce 7 new joiners today, taking the total to 20 countries. We all depend on ocean.
We like questions.
Okay, so we heard there from Lord Goldsmith, Zach Goldsmith, who I think personally has got the best job at the moment in the British government on environmental affairs. He's a long-time advocate for sustainability and environmental issues, and they're setting out some of the ways that the British government is taking forward action, particularly in connection with COP26, of course, the Global Climate Change Conference, which the UK was to have hosted this November, but because of COVID, it's been put back to next November. That is a pity, obviously, because we lose a certain amount of time, but on the other hand, it does give us a bit more time to build up some of these alliances, such as, for example, the Global Ocean Alliance that he was talking about. We've got a couple of questions coming in, one from Kayla and Tay, which I can put to the panelists. What do you think about the idea of using waste to generate energy as a way of solving the plastic problem?
I think it depends on the process. A lot of people are, a lot of places around the world, they are doing this, but there are a lot of emissions that are associated with it. The one that I would have put the most hope behind is Mura technology, and we'll be hearing more about that later in this conference. But the idea that we can just put it all into a process and make fuel things up with it, with everything that's happening with climate issues at the moment, what concerns me is that people will continue to use plastic exponentially because they think, well, it's okay, we can use it for fuel, and that's not the answer. As a short-term solution to clear up the mess we've made, certainly there's room for it, but with the Mura technology, you don't have the same issue with emissions into the atmosphere.
Yeah. Sylvia, do you have any views on that?
We just have to be much more creative. We have I believe that if we make this a priority, the intellect is there to solve the problem. There's increasing attention being paid to what is known as the circular economy. You don't throw things away. You don't burn things to get rid of them. You build things with the idea that they will morph into another positive lifetime, if you will. And recycling is the phrase that we now use, but as Joe points out, it's not really the answer, because ultimately there's an end point. So we have to think it through. But the first step toward getting to where we need to be is recognize we've got a problem and it's real. And you can't just toss it off as not important. It is. Make it a priority. We're finding a vaccine for the virus a priority. We've got these brilliant minds, sense of urgency. Let's get at it. Let's do it. And let's pour money, resources into solving this problem. When we mobilize like that and really focus on the issue, then there's a chance we can actually pull it off. But until we do, complacency, that's the biggest problem we are now facing. It's the complacency about climate, complacency about the destruction of the natural systems that underpin our existence. We think it's always going to be okay.
And there's a real paradox there, isn't there? I mean, with COVID, we're all listening to scientists and following medical lead and scientific lead, and yet for years on climate change, we've been ignoring scientists or people have carried on with their, with their daily lives without feeling the same sort of pressure. And there's a question that's come in on the role of the corporations in this, role of business. I mean, what role should business be playing? Or is business just simply there to respond to consumers and operate within whatever legal frameworks are imposed by governments? Anyone want to tackle that? Paul, you look like you've got some thoughts on that.
I've got a thought, and it's to do with values, because this is a terrific opportunity for business to really display true core values. And I'm only half joking about my theoretical voting form, where people in the future, I have a dream where, number one, it says you must display your values. So if someone is going to sit for a community leadership role or business chief executive or politics, any of these leadership influential positions, it should be, I'm hoping it will become the society norm that you would have to expect to display your values. And I think the opportunity there is that when we go buy a mortgage or insurance or a car or anything, rather than look at the, what color is it, we would say, what's your values? And I think if we can get this in the education system now through things like Blue Hope, we can then expect future generations to assume that people are going to display their values. So it would be, I've done this for humanities, frontline, not just sending money, but frontline stuff. I've spent my life doing this. As a kid, I volunteered for that. I display art and humanities and, environmental work all over the place. And then it would be the other things. And what would happen then is that business leaders, even if in their heart they didn't feel like it, they would have to get those values or they couldn't get a job. So they could go home at night and go, God, it's a terrible day. I had to volunteer for a plastic cleanup job. Can you believe it? What a disaster. But I had to do it to get voted in to do my job. So even if they didn't mean it, they'd have to do it.
Well, there's another piece to that, Paul, or all of you, and that is with respect to value, we're not accounting for nature. We think of clean air as a given. There's not a cost involved. We used to think of trees primarily as board feet of lumber, not as something that had an intrinsic value, let alone the ecological value, or the fact that oxygen is generated that keeps us alive. Whales used to be valued only pounds of meat, barrels of oil. Fish are still valued primarily as, products. We have to change and put on the balance sheet. When you take something out of the ocean, there's a cost that everybody pays, or that they're not free. The accounting base of fish is zero until you've killed them. A dead fish is worth something. A live fish is not. How can that be? We're not accounting for nature properly. And we have used water as if it's just a place to, take our sewage or to accept our garbage, whether it's in fresh water or the ocean. No, there's a cost to that. Don't we value a planet that works in our favor? We have to think differently. The gross national product, it doesn't account for what we take from nature. We're embarking this year, 2020, with a potential for mining the deep sea. How can we put a value on manganese nodules that have taken 1 million years to make something the size of, a walnut? And because we value the metals in there, but we don't value what the real cost of taking them is. We don't value the cost when we take fish out of the ocean. It's tremendously destructive, but we don't put that cost on the balance sheet. We just, we put a $sign on the dead fish, not the cost of taking them, or the plastic that winds up, constantly moving around in the sea. That's a cost, but we only see the plus side of the ledger, not the minus side of the ledger. So if we insist that corporations do honest accounting for the cost as well as what we now think of as value, we might get somewhere. Like we think that plastic is cheap, but if you put the real cost of the plastic back to what it really costs humanity, it's not cheap. We're paying the cost. It's really expensive. So let's account for it properly. I mean, we wouldn't be packaging drinks in plastic if we really accounted for what it costs all of us. And you've experienced it because you had to deal with all that plastic that was retrieved. You had a cost to dealing with it. It didn't go back to the bottling company or the packaging company, but it should.
Yeah.
It's not cheap.
Yeah, and that's clearly a failure of the capitalist system, if you can put it that way, that these costs are not factored in. So
No.
as you rightly say, we enjoy cheap products, but then we all pay in the long term, don't we? I've got a question for you actually, Sylvia, a question from Runak Thakur, which is, what do you think about deep water drilling, I guess for oil rather than the dredging you were referring to?
Well, look, I keep coming back to now we know. When drilling for oil 60, 70 years ago, it seemed like such a good idea. And look at the benefits. Look at how humanity has prospered. We have transportation, we have all the communication that is powered by fossil fuels. And whether it's from the land or tiptoeing into the ocean, taking from the deep sea, all of it was justified based on what we could see as the benefits. It's only now that we can look back and say, we forgot about the costs. Look at the cost that it is now becoming clear. When burning the fossil fuels has given us this real problem called climate change, warming the planet, acidification of the ocean, things that you described. We weren't accounting for the potential downside. We're just looking at the upside. And there's been tremendous upside. We're all the beneficiaries of burning all those fossil fuels. But it's a one-time thing. Again, something that has taken millions of years, fossilized sunlight, that we have burned through those assets and thought of just how the plus side of the ledger. But now that we know we have to think differently and say, thank you, fossil fuels. You've given us the most important thing, that's knowledge. Now let's use that knowledge. And while we still have time, we still have a planet that more or less works in our favor, but we have to hurry. Climate scientists say we had maybe 10 years to buckle down, the way we're really taking seriously the threat of this one little virus. It's got our attention, and we're working together in a way that is unprecedented with a planet that is so diverse and so at odds on so many levels, but we're united in our vulnerability, and we're united in trying to solve the problem. So why can't we look and say, look, fossil fuels, it's a problem, really a problem, because it's causing so many downside issues that we weren't aware of when we started this. I mean, we have hope based on knowing, but people, it takes something to motivate us to pull together. Maybe this is the moment. Maybe 2020 is that turning point.
Yes, well, absolutely. Let's hope so. Got a few more questions coming in. Joe, there's one which I think be interesting to hear your views on, but I think we'll come to it later, and that's the question of the role of the consumer. Maybe we can talk about that when we talk about the worksheet towards the end. But then a question, I think, for both Paul and Joe, which is on these new technologies we're talking about. How can we incentivize people to take up and use the new technologies that might help address some of these problems?
I think that before we even start with that, we need to make people realize what's at stake here. I think not enough people value the ocean. Our education, certainly when I was doing biology, it wasn't until I went to university that I was able to start studying the ocean. We were told, for example, that it's the forests that provide our oxygen and absorb our CO2. The ocean provides more than half the oxygen we breathe. It is literally our life support system. And I think that if people realize the value of the ocean and how connected we are with it, there would be a lot more impetus for people to stop what we're doing to the ocean, stop extracting everything from it, stop putting all of our effluents and our rubbish into it, because they would realize just how important it is to our survival. So I think education right from the start, and that will pique people's interest to look for solutions. But as to getting governments involved, eventually it will come from legislation. But these solutions are out there, they're in development all the time. Since I started working on this, new technology has come through. But we have to understand that many of these have downsides as well. It's not just this silver bullet, this will solve it. The thing that's going to solve it is behavioral change, but understanding what plastic is, why it's good, why it's really bad, particularly in the environment. And that all comes from education, not just through the school system, but businesses, corporations, and the public too. I can see Paul's itching to say something as well.
I agree with everything, Joe. I've just got 3 steps. I think publicly we should all get behind education systems supporting learning outside the classroom. It does seem crazy to me. We've got an education system that was fit for the Industrial Revolution. You go in, you learn something, and then you go out to get a job. I think we should do as much as possible for learning outside the classroom, and a big percentage of that should be in the sea. I'm amazed that we don't have sea swimming, snorkeling, and diving in every school curriculum globally. That would certainly change people's priorities. And the second step, go ahead, Sylvia.
I would add to that, so far we're just looking at this part of the ocean. We're looking at the top of it. Most of the ocean is deep and dark and cold, but it's all full of life, and it all connects to climate. It all connects to planetary chemistry, and we need to get down there and explore. And I want kids to be at 1,000 meters, 10,000 meters. I want kids, and I want grown-ups too. I want CEOs and corporate leaders and teachers and moms and dads. We need to understand that, yes, where coral reefs are and where we can see the beautiful sunlit portion is great, but that's just the skin of the ocean. That most of life on Earth lives in the dark. And it's deep and it's cold and it's under pressure, but it's beautiful and it's really important. And we have to get out there so people know and don't destroy it. I see plastic, I've used 30 different submarines over the years. And every time I go, it doesn't matter, well, I've only been to the average depth of the ocean, which is only, 2.5 miles. It's only 4 kilometers. I mean, deeper than I can go holding my breath, but it's not as deep as the ocean by any means. It's just the average depth of the ocean. There's plastic, there's junk. And the things that worry me the most are the things I cannot see. It's a changing chemistry of the ocean. It comes about through what we're putting in and through what we're taking out. You change the chemistry, whether it's the pH or all of the stuff that comes out of the plastics or the things that we deliberately dump into the ocean. You change everything, starting with the viruses, starting with the bacteria, but going right up through the food chain, through the chemistry of our home planet. It affects the oxygen cycle, it affects the carbon cycle, it affects how we live, it affects our home. We have to understand that. And the wonderful and terrible thing, the wonderful thing is we know this. The terrible thing is we didn't know it until fairly recently. The smartest people who ever lived could not know what is now knowable. But the good news is kids are growing up with it. I mean, your wish is kind of coming true but we need to do a whole lot more of it. And Paul, you're absolutely right. No child left dry. Get them out there.
I come.
Get them down there.
You
I'm
can't
from
go
the
on with that
northeast.
personal experience.
Well, I'm from the northeast of Scotland, and we were forced into the sea, and it was a very, very bitter experience, I have to tell you. But it was no doubt it was very good for me.
Maybe that explains who you are.
Who knows? Before we come to the final element, which is formally launching our campaign, there is one other very interesting question that's come in, and that is about it's connected to the role of government, and that is a reference, I think, to the policy mentioned by Lord Goldsmith about the tax on carrier bags. So governments are now taking in money from taxes on plastic. What do you think they should be doing with that money?
As far as the UK goes, I think initially the tax on carrier bags was going back to some of the NGOs. Sadly, not ours, but I do know that quite a few people did benefit from the 5p tax. It's amazing how something so small has really raised awareness and how many people now do bring their own bags. But I think there's an awful lot more that governments can do. And the legislation that bans plastic straws, coffee stirrers, and plastic cotton buds, ear cleaners, should have come out in May, and now that's been delayed till October because of COVID. And I cannot understand what the relationship is. These are useless things that we have alternatives to. So why delay from May till October and let many, many more of these ridiculous items get into the system? I mean, a coffee stirrer, you stir your coffee and that's it, and it gets thrown away. A friend of mine said to me that if Shakespeare had used a coffee stirrer, it would still be on the planet now. And I'm sure way beyond my grandchildren's time, and probably theirs too. So I cannot see any sense in delaying that legislation. That should have been fundamental to kick this off.
For me, it seems that some of that money from initiatives like the plastic bags and deposit fees and all that should go to help some businesses that need a bit of a transition period. Because I can imagine if I was running a business, I'd do everything I could to make it sustainable and make this thing work with decent values. But if I was struggling in a small family business and thinking, well, come on, we're doing good work here, but we just can't afford bamboo plates and bamboo knives and forks and all of that stuff. But I could easily do it and remain profitable if I had a bit of help from the government. So I just wonder if some of that, short-term funding couldn't be for people that are trying to do the right thing, but they just need a bit of a boost to make it happen.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, this is a very difficult time, obviously, for business. COVID has wrought havoc in lots of different areas. I mean, on the one hand, it may be that this is the moment where we can change our behaviours. I mean, I've certainly noticed that because going out to go shopping has become a real chore. Lots of things we probably would have bought in the past, we're just not buying anymore. And, who needs coffee stirrers, frankly? There's a lot of things we've got that we can certainly do without, but we've kind of got used to them. So on the one hand, maybe it's a good moment to change people's behavior. But on the other, I fear that, those businesses that might want to transition to a more sustainable model that need investment to do that might find it very hard to secure that investment. But so I don't know, and there are swings and roundabouts at the moment, I think. But that brings us on to the whole consumer point and the awareness. We've already talked a bit about education and about our desire to make sure that every child understands what the sea is all about, what the ocean's all about. Back to Sir David Attenborough, I think he's done more than any other person to make sure that everybody globally understands more about notwithstanding the contributions that you panelists have made, which are absolutely considerable. But so much has been done now to raise awareness. And Joe, do you want to talk to us a bit about the worksheet that accompanies the Blue Hope campaign?
Yes, so downloadable from the website, from the Blue Hope website, and obviously from Plastic Oceans UK website. This is something that we were thinking about children working, having to do homeschooling, something that they could all do that would be a little bit of fun, and it's called Plastic Detectives. And what they do is they go around the house and look at the different types of plastic that are there, And it's interesting how much we use without actually thinking about it. So once it's been highlighted by the child, they will then be showing their brothers and sisters and parents, and it will become a talking point when they get back to school. Sometimes when I give talks to schools, I ask the children to bring in all of the plastic items that their families would have thrown away the week running up to that. And the amount that comes in that obviously we talk about, we make things out of, that in itself is a huge eye-opener for those families to realize just how much they don't even think about. Comes through the system, they use it, it's in the bin, it's out the door. But look at all of it, how much is one family using and obviously disposing of? That's really something to get people going. So the plastic detectors one, I know it's been translated into an awful lot of languages and it will be translated into more. But the other thing that they'll see as part of it, we have 3 short films. One of them is all about our ocean. All of them are introduced by Sir David Attenborough. So one is really telling us how important the oceans are. The next one is about plastics, why it's a brilliant substance, but why it stays in the environment so long, what it was designed for and what we're doing with it. And the third one is exactly what plastic does to the environment and to wildlife, particularly marine wildlife. So it's all there, and we've got translations too. So I hope everyone will go to the website.
Thanks very much, Jo. Well, I'm delighted that this campaign has got such fantastic support from all of you, from Sir David Attenborough, from all of our partners, including the Malaysian government. And I'm delighted to say that my colleagues across this whole region are also using it to promote in their markets as well. So I'm hopeful that we'll reach a very, very large number of people as we do this. And as you say, the worksheet is available. It's currently available in Bahasa Malaysia and Mandarin, and it will be translated into other languages as well.
And Spanish.
Indeed. Thank you. Could I, we have to close in a second. Any final thoughts? Sylvia, from you first.
People say awareness, and I suppose that's the bottom line. Education, once you know, you might care. You can know and not care, but you can't care if you don't know. And now we know what was not knowable when I was a kid. And there's cause for hope in that. But hope alone won't do it. We need to take what we know and act on it. As if, I mean, to act as if your life depends on it, because, you know, it really does. We're not making this stuff up. We have the evidence, and everyone should do what a child does naturally. You ask questions, you find answers. If there isn't an answer in a book or from someone you trust, go find out for yourself. Be an explorer. Just get out there and make a difference. Everyone counts, everyone. All gazillion of us.
And together we can make a difference. And I think that's, for me, the most important thing. So thank you all very much. It's been a fantastic, I've really enjoyed the conversation. We I hope have reached a lot of people, and Blue Hope. So please, everybody, join in, get involved, and let's change the world together. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Charles. Thanks,
Thank you.
Sylvia. See you soon.
Okay, somewhere.
Okay.
Good sleep.
Super.
Hello, my name is David Attenborough, and I'm a naturalist and a natural history filmmaker. Over the last 65 years, I've been very privileged to travel the world and see every environment from the ocean to the jungle. We're now facing a range of extremely challenging environmental problems. But one of the most pressing issues of our times is plastic pollution. While plastic now affects the entire planet, it's our oceans that bear the full brunt of plastic pollution. What's so tragic about plastic pollution is that it is so totally unnecessary. The plastic in our oceans should never have found its way there in the first place. And yet, a staggering 8 million tons of plastic now ends up in our oceans every year, causing untold harm to marine wildlife. Blue Planet 2's crew saw plastic everywhere they filmed. But this catastrophic damage to our oceans is reversible, and nature can recover if we give it a chance. While the actions of just one of us, you, may seem to be so very small with really no effect at all, in fact, knowing there are hundreds of thousands of people all doing the same thing is starting to have a truly positive effect. Every single one of us now needs to think, and I mean really think, about how we use plastic. So, I strongly urge you all to treat plastic with care, because if it reaches the environment, it will stay there for a very long time, if not forever, and ultimately affect us all. Every one of us should be extremely proud of their natural heritage and passionate to protect and conserve it and ensure that it remains around for future generations. We all have a responsibility to care for our planet. The future of humanity, and indeed all life on Earth, now depends on us. Thank you very much, and good luck.